to behold the works which his hands had made, and he saw that everything was very good. See General I 31. 133 As a matter of course. 134 Too great easiness of access. 135 Predilections that are undeserved. 136 Proverbs XXVIII. 21 The whole passage stands thus in our version: He that maketh haste to be rich shall not be innocent. To have respect of persons is not good, for a piece of bread, that man will transgress. 137 By the consent of all he was fit to govern, if he had not governed. 138 Of the emperors, Vespasian alone changed for the better after his accession. Tac. History I 49, 50, AL2XXII 139 Plud. Vit. Demosth. 17, 18. 140 It is not improbable that this passage suggested Pope's beautiful lines in the Essay on Man, EPI 125-28. Pride still is aiming at the blessed abodes, men would be angels, angels would be gods. Aspiring to be gods, if angels fell, aspiring to be angels, men rebel. 141 Augur Gislain Busbeck, or Busbequius, a learned traveller, born at Cummins, in Flanders, in 1522. He was employed by the Emperor Ferdinand as ambassador to the Sultan Suleiman II. He was afterwards ambassador to France, where he died, in 1592. His letters relative to his travels in the East, which are written in Latin, contain much interesting information. They were the pocket companion of Gibbon, and are highly praised by him. 142 In this instance the stork or crane was probably protected, not on the abstract grounds mentioned in the text, but for reasons of state policy and gratitude combined. In eastern climates the cranes and dogs are far more efficacious than human agency in removing filth and offal, and thereby diminishing the chances of pestilence. Superstition, also, may have formed another motive, as we learn from a letter written from Adrianople, by Lady Montague, in 1718, that storks were held there in a sort of religious reverence, because they are supposed to make every winter the pilgrimage to Mecca. To say truth, they are the happiest subjects under the Turkish government, and are so sensible of their privileges, that they walk the streets without fear, and generally build their nests in the lower parts of the houses. Happy are those whose houses are so distinguished, as the vulgar Turks are perfectly persuaded that they will not be that year attacked either by fire or pestilence. Storks are still protected, by municipal law, in Holland and Rome unmolested about the marketplaces. 143 Niccolò Machiavelli, a Florentine statesman. He wrote discourses on the first decade of Livy, which were conspicuous for their liberality of sentiment, and just and profound reflections. This work was succeeded by his famous treatise, Il Principe, the Prince, his patron, Caesar Borgia, being the model of the perfect prince there described by him. The whole scope of this work is directed to one object: the maintenance of power, however acquired. Though its precepts are no doubt based upon the actual practice of the Italian politicians of that day, it has been suggested by some writers that the work was a covert exposure of the deformity of the shocking maxims that it professes to inculcate. The question of his motives has been much discussed, and is still considered open. The word Machiavellism has, however, been adopted to denote all that is deformed, insincere, and perfidious in politics. He died in great poverty, in the year 1527. 144 Vitae Disc. Sup. Live 2. 145 St. Matthew v 45. For he maketh his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. 146. This is a portion of our Saviour's reply to the rich man who asked him what he should do to inherit eternal life. Then Jesus, beholding him, loved him, and said unto him, One thing thou lackest, go thy way, sell whatsoever thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come, take up the cross, and follow me. St. Mark X 21. 147, CST Luke 16. 21. 148. Timon of Athens, as he is generally called, being so styled by Shakespeare in the play which he has founded on his story, was surnamed the Misanthrope, from the hatred which he bore to his fellow men. He was attached to Apementus, another Athenian of similar character to himself, and he professed to esteem Alcibiades, because he foresaw that he would one day bring ruin on his country. Going to the public assembly on one occasion, he mounted the rostrum, and stated that he had a fig tree, on which many worthy citizens had ended their days by the halter, that he was going to cut it down for the purpose of building on the spot, and therefore recommended all such as were inclined, to avail themselves of it before it was too late. 149. A piece of timber that has grown crooked, and has been so cut that the trunk and branch form an angle. 150. He probably here refers to the myrrh tree. Incision is the method usually adopted for extracting the resinous juices of trees, as in the India rubber and gutta percha trees. 151. A votive, and, in the present instance, a vicarious offering. He alludes to the words of St. Paul in his second epistle to Timothy 2. 10. Therefore I endure all things for the elect's sake, that they may also obtain the salvation which is in Christ Jesus with eternal glory. 152. Consideration of, or predilection for, particular persons. 153. The Low Countries had then recently emancipated themselves from the galling yoke of Spain. They were called the 7 United Provinces of the Netherlands. 154. This passage may at first sight appear somewhat contradictory, but he means to say, that those who are first ennobled will commonly be found more conspicuous for the prominence of their qualities, both good and bad. 155. Consistent with reason and justice. 156. The periods of the equinoxes. 157. He often warns, too, that secret revolt is impending, that treachery and open warfare are ready to burst forth. Verg. George. I 465. 158. Mother Earth, exasperated at the wrath of the deities, produced her, as they tell, a last birth, a sister to the giants Koos, and Enceladus. Verg. And 4. 179. 159. Great public odium once excited, his deeds, whether good or whether bad, cause his downfall. Bacon has here quoted incorrectly, probably from memory. The words of Tacitus are, Histori Bic 7 Inviso Semel Principi, Scu Bani, Scu Male, Facta Premunt, the ruler once detested, his actions, whether good or whether bad, cause his downfall. 160. They attended to their duties, but still, as preferring rather to discuss the commands of their rulers, than to obey them. Tac. History 2. 39. 161. He alludes to the bad policy of Henry III of France, who espoused the part of the League, which was formed by the Duke of Guise and other Catholics for the extirpation of the Protestant faith. When too late he discovered his error, and finding his own authority entirely superseded, he caused the Duke of Guise and the Cardinal de Lorraine, his brother, to be assassinated. 162. The primary motive power. He alludes to an imaginary center of gravitation, or central body, which was supposed to set all the other heavenly bodies in motion. 163 Too freely to remember their own rulers. 164 I will unloose the girdles of kings. He probably alludes here to the first verse of the 45th chapter of Isaiah, Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates. 165 Hence devouring usury, and interest accumulating in lapse of time, hence shaken credit, and warfare, profitable to the many. Lucan. Farce. I 181. 166 Warfare profitable to the many. 167 To grief there is a limit, not so to fear. 168 Check, or daunt. 169 This is similar to the proverb now in common use, 'tis the last feather that breaks the back of the camel. 170 The state. 171 Those sumptuary laws are probably just in theory, they have been found impracticable in any other than infant states. Their principle, however, is certainly recognized in such countries as by statutory enactment discountenance gaming. Those who are opposed to such laws upon principle, would do well to look into Bernard Mandeville's Fable of the Bees, or Private Vices Public Benefits. The Romans had numerous sumptuary laws, and in the Middle Ages there were many enactments in this country against excess of expenditure upon wearing apparel and the pleasures of the table. 172 He means that they do not add to the capital of the country. 173 At the expense of foreign countries. 174 The workmanship will surpass the material. Ovid, Med. B2. L5. 175 He alludes to the manufactures of the Low Countries. 176 Like manure. 177 Sometimes printed engrossing, great pasturages. By engrossing, is meant the trade of engrossers, men who buy up all that can be got of a particular commodity, then raise the price. By great pasturages is meant turning corn land into pasture. Of this practice great complaints had been made for near a century before Bacon's time, and a law passed to prevent it. See Lord Herbert of Cherbury's History of Henry VIII. 178 The myth of Pandora's box, which is here referred to, is related in the works and days of Hesiod. Epimetheus was the personification of afterthought, while his brother Prometheus represented forethought, or prudence. It was not Epimetheus that opened the box, but Pandora Algift, whom, contrary to the advice of his brother, he had received at the hands of Mercury, and had made his wife. In their house stood a closed jar, which they were forbidden to open. Till her arrival, this had been kept untouched, but her curiosity prompting her to open the lid, all the evils hitherto unknown to man flew out and spread over the earth, and she only shut it down in time to prevent the escape of Hope. 179 Sylla did not know his letters, and so he could not dictate. This saying is attributed by Suetonius to Julius Caesar. It is a play on the Latin verb dictere, which means either to dictate, or to act the part of dictator, according to the context. As this saying was presumed to be a reflection on Sylla's ignorance, and to imply that by reason thereof he was unable to maintain his power, it was concluded by the Roman people that Caesar, who was an elegant scholar, feeling himself subject to no such inability, did not intend speedily to yield the reins of power Suet. Vit. See July. Cas 77, INCFALI 7. 12180 That soldiers were levied by him, not bought. Tac. History I5. 181 If I live, there shall no longer be need of soldiers in the Roman Empire. Flav. Vop. Vit. Prob 20. 182 And such was the state of feeling, that a few dared to perpetrate the worst of crimes, more wished to do so, all submitted to it. History I 28. 183 He probably alludes to the legends or miraculous stories of the saints, such as walking with their heads off, preaching to the fishes, sailing over the sea on a cloak, and CNC 184. This is a book that contains the Jewish traditions, and the rabbinical explanations of the law. It is replete with wonderful narratives. 185 This passage not improbably contains the germ of Pope's famous lines: a little learning is a dangerous thing, drink deep, or taste not the Pyrean spring. 186 A philosopher of Abdera, the first who taught the system of atoms, which was afterwards more fully developed by Democritus and Epicurus. 187 He was a disciple of the last named philosopher, and held the same principles. He also denied the existence of the soul after death. He is considered to have been the parent of experimental philosophy, and was the first to teach, what is now confirmed by science, that the Milky Way is an accumulation of stars. 188 Spirit. 189 Psalm 14. 1. And Lain. 192 Whose, seeming, advantage it is, the wish being father to the thought. 191 It is not profane to deny the existence of the deities of the vulgar, but, to apply to the divinities the received notions of the vulgar, is profane. Diog. Laird. X 123. 192 He alludes to the native tribes of the continent of America and the West Indies. 193 He was an Athenian philosopher, who, from the greatest superstition, became an avowed atheist. He was proscribed by the Areopagus for speaking against the gods with ridicule and contempt, and is supposed to have died at Corinth. 194 A Greek philosopher, a disciple of Theodorus the atheist, to whose opinions he adhered. His life was said to have been profligate, and his death superstitious. 195 Lucian ridiculed the follies and pretensions of some of the ancient philosophers, but though the freedom of his style was such as to cause him to be censured for impiety, he hardly deserves the stigma of atheism here cast upon him by the learned author. 196 It is not for us now to say, like priest like people, for the people are not even so bad as the priest. Saint Bernard, abbot of Clairvaux, preached the Second Crusade against the Saracens, and was unsparing in his censures of the sins then prevalent among the Christian priesthood. His writings are voluminous, and by some he has been considered as the latest of the Fathers of the Church. 197 A superior nature. 198 We may admire ourselves, conscript fathers, as much as we please, still, neither by numbers did we vanquish the Spaniards, nor by bodily strength the Gauls, nor by cunning the Carthaginians, nor through the arts the Greeks, nor, in fine, by the inborn and native good sense of this our nation, and this our race and soil, the Italians and Latins themselves, but through our devotion and our religious feeling, and this, the sole true wisdom, the having perceived that all things are regulated and governed by the providence of the immortal gods, have we subdued all races and nations. CIC. De. Harus. Respond. 199 The justice of this position is, perhaps, somewhat doubtful. The superstitious man must have some scruples, while he who believes not in a god, if there is such a person, needs have none. 200 Time was personified in Saturn, and by this story was meant its tendency to destroy whatever it has brought into existence. Plut. De superstit. X 201 The primary motive power. 202 This council commenced in 1545, and lasted 18 years. It was convened for the purpose of opposing the rising spirit of Protestantism, and of discussing and settling the disputed points of the Catholic faith. 203 Irregular or anomalous movements. 204 An epicycle is a smaller circle, whose center is in the circumference of a greater one. 205 To account for. 206 Synods, or councils. 207 At the present day called attaches. 208 He probably means the refusing to join on the occasion of drinking healths when taking wine. 209 Something to create excitement. 210 The heart of kings is unsearchable. Provv 3. 211 Commodus fought naked in public as a gladiator, and prided himself on his skill as a swordsman. 212 Making a stop at, or dwelling too long upon. 213 After a prosperous reign of 21 years, Diocletian abdicated the throne, and retired to a private station. 214 After having reigned 35 years, he abdicated the thrones of Spain and Germany, and passed the last 2 years of his life in retirement at Saint Just, a convent in Estremadura. 215 Philost. Vit. Apol. Tyon. V28. 216 The desires of monarchs are generally impetuous and conflicting among themselves. Quoted rightly, AL2. XXII 5, from Sallust, BJ 113. 217 He was especially the rival of the Emperor Charles V, and was one of the most distinguished sovereigns that ever ruled over France. 218 An eminent historian of Florence. His great work, which is here alluded to, is The History of Italy during his own time, which is considered one of the most valuable productions of that age. 219 Spoken badly of. Livia was said to have hastened the death of Augustus, to prepare the accession of her son Tiberius to the throne. 220 Soliman the Magnificent was one of the most celebrated of the Ottoman monarchs. He took the Isle of Rhodes from the Knights of St. John. He also subdued Moldavia, Wallachia, and the greatest part of Hungary, and took from the Persians Georgia and Baghdad. He died AD 1566. His wife Roxolana, who was originally a slave called Rosa or Hazathia, with the Pasha Rustan, conspired against the life of his son Mustafa, and by their instigation this distinguished prince was strangled in his father's presence. 221 The infamous Isabella of Anjou. 222 Adulteresses. 223 He, however, distinguished himself by taking Cyprus from the Venetians in the year 1571. 224 He was falsely accused by his brother Perseus of attempting to dethrone his father, on which he was put to death by the order of Philip, BC 180. 225 Anselm was Archbishop of Canterbury in the time of William Rufus and Henry I. Though his private life was pious and exemplary, through his rigid assertion of the rights of the clergy he was continually embroiled with his sovereign. Thomas à Becket pursued a similar course, but with still greater violence. 226 The great vessel that conveys the blood to the liver, after it has been enriched by the absorption of nutriment from the intestines. 227 This is an expression similar to our proverb, penny wise and pound foolish. 228 A subdivision of the Shire. 229 The Janizaries were the bodyguards of the Turkish sultans, and enacted the same disgraceful part in making and unmaking monarchs, as the mercenary Praetorian guards of the Roman Empire. 230 Remember that thou art a man. 231 Remember that thou art a god. 232 The representative of God. 233 Isaiah 9. 6, his name shall be called, Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. 234 Provxx. 18. Every purpose is established by counsel, and with good advice make war. 235 The wicked Rehoboam, from whom the 10 tribes of Israel revolted, and elected Jeroboam their king. See 1 Kings 12. 236 Hesiod, Theog. 886 237 The political world has not been convinced of the truth of this doctrine of Lord Bacon, as cabinet councils are now held probably by every sovereign in Europe. 238 I am full of outlets. Turian. I too. 25 239 That is, without a complicated machinery of government. 240 Master of the Rolls and Privy Councillor under Henry VI, to whose cause he faithfully adhered. Edward IV. Promoted him to the See of Ely, and made him Lord Chancellor. He was elevated to the See of Canterbury by Henry VII, and in 1493 received the Cardinal's hat. 241 Privy Councillor and Keeper of the Privy Seal to Henry VII, and, after enjoying several bishoprics in succession, translated to the See of Winchester. He was an able statesman, and highly valued by Henry VII. On the accession of Henry VIII, his political influence was counteracted by Wolsey, on which he retired to his diocese, and devoted the rest of his life to acts of piety and munificence. 242 Before mentioned, relative to Jupiter and Metis. 243 Remedied. 244 He shall not find faith upon the earth. Lord Bacon probably alludes to the words of our Saviour, St. Luke 18. 8. When the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith upon the earth? 245 He means to say, that this remark was only applicable to a particular time, namely, the coming of Christ. The period of the destruction of Jerusalem was probably referred to. 246 'Tis the especial virtue of a prince to know his own men. 247 In his disposition, or inclination. 248 Liable to opposition from. 249 According to classes, or, as we vulgarly say, in the lump. Lord Bacon means that princes are not, as a matter of course, to take counsellors merely on the presumption of talent, from their rank and station, but that, on the contrary, they are to select such as are tried men, and with regard to whom there can be no mistake. 250 The best counsellors are the dead. 251 Are afraid to open their mouths. 252 Night time for counsel. Nu upsilon capitao beta omicron upsilon lambda. Gaisf. PAR. GRB 359. 253 On the accession of James VI of Scotland to the throne of England in 1603. 254 A phrase much in use with the Romans, signifying, to attend to the business in hand. 255 A tribunicial or declamatory manner. 256 I'll follow the bent of your humor. 257 The Sibyl alluded to here is the Cumean, the most celebrated, who offered the Sibylline books for sale to Tarquin the Proud. At this time, an unknown woman appeared at court, loaded with 9 volumes, which she offered to sell, but at a very considerable price. Tarquin refusing to give it, she withdrew and burnt 3 of the 9. Some time after she returned to court, and demanded the same price for the remaining 6. This made her looked upon as a mad woman, and she was driven away with scorn. Nevertheless, having burnt the half of what were left, she came a third time, and demanded for the remaining 3 the same price which she had asked for the whole 9. The novelty of such a proceeding made Tarquin curious to have the books examined. They were put, therefore, into the hands of the augurs, who, finding them to be the oracles of the Sibyl of Cumae, declared them to be an invaluable treasure. Upon this the woman was paid the sum she demanded, and she soon after disappeared, having first exhorted the Romans to preserve her books with care. Hooke's Roman History. 258 Bald head. He alludes to the common saying, "Take time by the forelock." 259 Faudate. 260 Ham. ILV 845. 261 Packing the cards is an admirable illustration of the author's meaning. It is a cheating exploit, by which knaves, who, perhaps, are inferior players, ensure to themselves the certainty of good hands. 262 Send them both naked among strangers, and then you will see. 263 This word is used here in its primitive sense of retail dealers. It is said to have been derived from a custom of the Flemings, who first settled in this country in the 14th century, stopping the passengers as they passed their shops, and saying to them, "Haber das, Herr. Will you take this, sir?" The word is now generally used as synonymous with linen draper. 264 To watch. 265 State. 266 Discussing matters. 267 He refers to the occasion when Nehemiah, on presenting the wine, as cupbearer to King Artaxerxes, appeared sorrowful, and, on being asked the reason of it, entreated the king to allow Jerusalem to be rebuilt. Nehemiah 2. 268 This can hardly be called a marriage, as, at the time of the intrigue, Messalina was the wife of Claudius, but she forced Caius Silius, of whom she was deeply enamored, to divorce his own wife, that she herself might enjoy his society. The intrigue was disclosed to Claudius by Narcissus, who was his freedman, and the pander to his infamous vices, on which Silius was put to death. Vitae Tac. An 11. 29, Seq 269 To speak in his turn. 270 Be questioned upon. 271 Kept on good terms. 272 Desire it. 273 That he did not have various hopes in view, but solely the safety of the emperor. Tigellinus was the profligate minister of Nero, and Africanus Burrus was the chief of the Praetorian Guards. Tac. And 14. 57 274 As Nathan did, when he reproved David for his criminality with Bathsheba. 2 Samuel 12. 275 Use indirect stratagems. 276 He alludes to the old Cathedral of St. Paul, in London, which, in the 16th century, was a common lounge for idlers. 277 Movements, or springs. 278 Chances, or vicissitudes. 279 Enter deeply into. 280 Faults, or weak points. 281 The wise man gives heed to his own footsteps, the fool turneth aside to the snare. No doubt he here alludes to Ecclesiastes 14. 2, which passage is thus rendered in our version, "The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness." 282 Mischievous. 283 It must be remembered that Bacon was not a favorer of the Copernican system. 284 Lovers of themselves without a rival. Ad. Chew Father 3. 8 285 Remedy. 286 Adapted to each other. 287 Injures or impairs. 288 A thing suspected. 289 He probably alludes to Jeremiah 6. 16, Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways, and see, and ask for the old paths, where is the good way, and walk therein, and ye shall find rest for your souls. 290 That is, by means of good management. 291 It is supposed that he here alludes to Sir Amyas Paulet, a very able statesman, and the ambassador of Queen Elizabeth to the court of France. 292 Quotations. 293 Apologies. 294 Boasting. 295 Prejudice. 296 2 Tim 3. 5 297 Trifles with great effort. 298 With one brow raised to your forehead, the other bent downward to your chin, you answer that cruelty delights you not. In pies. 6 299 A foolish man, who fritters away the weight of matters by fine spun trifling on words. Vide Quint. X1. 300 Platt. Protog. I 337. 301 Find it easier to make difficulties and objections than to originate. 302 One really in insolvent circumstances, though to the world he does not appear so. 303 He here quotes from a passage in the Politica of Aristotle, Book I. He who is unable to mingle in society, or who requires nothing, by reason of sufficing for himself, is no part of the state, so that he is either a wild beast or a divinity. 304 Epimenides, a poet of Crete, of which Candia is the modern name, is said by Pliny to have fallen into a sleep which lasted 57 years. He was also said to have lived 299 years. Numa pretended that he was instructed in the art of legislation by the divine nymph Egeria, who dwelt in the Arician grove. Empedocles, the Sicilian philosopher, declared himself to be immortal, and to be able to cure all evils. He is said by some to have retired from society that his death might not be known, and to have thrown himself into the crater of Mount Etna. Apollonius of Tyana, the Pythagorean philosopher, pretended to miraculous powers, and after his death a temple was erected to him at that place. His life is recorded by Philostratus, and some persons, among whom are Hierocles, Dr. Moore, in his Mystery of Godliness, and recently Strauss, have not hesitated to compare his miracles with those of our Savior. 305 A great city, a great desert. 306 Sarsaparilla. 307 A liquid matter of a pungent smell, extracted from a portion of the body of the beaver. 308 Partakers of cares. 309 Plutarch, Vit. Pomp. 19, relates that Pompey said this upon Sylla's refusal to give him a triumph. 310 Plut. Vit. Jacques 64. 311 Cic. Philip. 1311. 312 These things, by reason of our friendship, I have not concealed from you. Vide Tac. And 4. 4313 Diocas. LXXV 314 Such infamous men as Tiberius and Sejanus hardly deserve this commendation. 315 Philip de Cummins. 316 Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, the valiant antagonist of Louis XI. Of France. De Cummins spent his early years at his court, but afterwards passed into the service of Louis XI. This monarch was notorious for his cruelty, treachery, and dissimulation, and had all the bad qualities of his contemporary, Edward IV. Of England, without any of his redeeming virtues. 317 Pythagoras went still further than this, as he forbade his disciples to eat flesh of any kind whatever. See the interesting speech which Ovid attributes to him in the 15th book of the Metamorphoses. Sir Thomas Browne, in his Pseudoxia, Browne's Works, Bond's Antique ed. Volume IP 27, ETSEQ, gives some curious explanations of the doctrines of this philosopher Plut. De Educat. Pure. 17318 Tapestry. Speaking hypercritically, Lord Bacon commits an anachronism here, as Arras did not manufacture tapestry till the Middle Ages. 319 Plut. VIT. Themist. 28 320 AP Stab. Serm. V 120. 321 James I 23. 322 He alludes to the recommendation which moralists have often given, that a person in anger should go through the alphabet to himself, before he allows himself to speak. 323 In his day, the musket was fixed upon a stand, called the rest, much as the jingals or matchlocks are used in the East at the present day. 324 From debts and encumbrances. 325 Plut. VIT. Themist. Add in it. 326 Equal to business. 327 He alludes to the following passage, St. Matthew 13:31, Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs, and becometh a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. 328 Verg. Ickle. 751. 329 Vitae. ALI 7. 11 330 He was vanquished by Lucullus, and finally submitted to Pompey Plut. VIT. Lucull. 27 331 He alludes to the prophetic words of Jacob on his deathbed, General Slicks. 9, 14, 15, Judah is a lion's whelp, he stooped down, he couched as a lion, and as an old lion. Issachar is a strong ass couching down between two burdens, and he saw that rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. 332 Sums of money voluntarily contributed by the people for the use of the sovereign. 333 Young trees. 334 A land strong in arms and in the richness of the soil. Verg. NI 535. 335 He alludes to the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, which is mentioned Daniel 4:10, I saw, and behold a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great. The tree grew, and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the side thereof to the end of all the earth, the leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all, the beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all flesh was fed of it. 336 Right of citizenship. 337 Right of trading. 338 Right of intermarriage. 339 Right of inheritance. 340 Right of suffrage. 341 Right of honors. 342 Long since the time of Lord Bacon, as soon as these colonies had arrived at a certain state of maturity, they at different periods revolted from the mother country. 343 The laws and ordinances promulgated by the sovereigns of Spain were so called. The term was derived from the Byzantine Empire. 344 Qualifications. 345 Attend to. 346 For a short or transitory period. 347 Be in a hurry. 348 It was its immense armaments that in a great measure consumed the vitals of Spain. 349 Pompey's plan is clearly that of Themistocles, for he believes that whoever is master of the sea will obtain the supreme power. Ad att 8. 350 Encomiums. 351 St. Matthew 6. 27, St. Luke 12. 25 352 The effects of which must be felt in old age. 353 Of benefit in your individual case. 354 Any striking change in the Constitution. 355 Take medical advice. 356 Incline rather to fully satisfying your hunger. 357 Celsus de Med I1. 358 To hope the best, but be fully prepared for the worst. 359 Suspicion is the passport to faith. 360 A censure of this nature has been applied by some to Dr. Johnson, and possibly with some reason. 361 To start the subject. 362 Requires to be bridled. 363 He quotes here from Ovid, Boy, spare the whip, and tightly grasp the reins. Med. 2 127. 364 One who tests or examines. 365 The galliard was a light active dance, much in fashion in the time of Queen Elizabeth. 366 Hits at, or remarks intended to be applied to, particular individuals. 367 A slight or insult. 368 A sarcastic remark. 369 The old term for colonies. 370 He perhaps alludes covertly to the conduct of the Spaniards in extirpating the aboriginal inhabitants of the West India Islands, against which the venerable Las Casas so eloquently but vainly protested. 371 Of course this censure would not apply to what is primarily and essentially a convict colony, the object of which is to drain the mother country of its impure superfluities. 372 Times have much changed since this was penned. Tobacco is now the staple commodity, and the source of the main business of Virginia. 373 To labor hard. 374 Marshy, from the French marais, a marsh. 375 Gewgaws, or spangles. 376 He alludes to Ecclesiastes v11, the words of which are somewhat varied in our version. When goods increase, they are increased that eat them, and what good is there to the owners thereof, saving the beholding of them with their eyes. 377 The rich man's wealth is his strong city. Proverbs x15, 18. 11 378 In his anxiety to increase his fortune, it was evident that not the gratification of avarice was sought, but the means of doing good. 379 He who hastens to riches will not be without guilt. In our version the words are, He that maketh haste to be rich shall not be innocent. Proverbs xxvii. 22 380 Pluto being the king of the infernal regions, or place of departed spirits. 381 Rent roll, or account taken of income. 382 Wait till prices have risen. 383 In the sweat of another's brow. He alludes to the words of Genesis 3. 19, In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread. 384 Planter of sugar canes. 385 Wills and childless persons were caught by him, as though with a hunting net. Tacit. And 13. 42 386 Pythoness, used in the sense of witch. He alludes to the witch of Endor, and the words in Samuel xxvii. 19 He is, however, mistaken in attributing these words to the witch. It was the spirit of Samuel that said, "Tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me." 387 But the house of Aeneas shall reign over every shore, both his children's children, and those who shall spring from them. And 397 388 After the lapse of years, ages will come in which ocean shall relax his chains around the world, and a vast continent shall appear, and Tiphys shall explore new regions, and Thule shall be no longer the utmost verge of earth. Senator Med 2. 375 389 He was king of Samos, and was treacherously put to death by Oroets, the governor of Magnesia, in Asia Minor. His daughter, in consequence of her dream, attempted to dissuade him from visiting Oroets, but in vain. Herod. 124. 390 Plut. Vit. Alex. 2 391 Thou shalt see me again at Philippi. Appian Bell. Civ 4. 134 392 Thou, also, Galba, shalt taste of empire. Suet. Vit. Gaul. 4 393 History v13. 394 Suet. Vit. Domit. 23 395 Catherine de Medicis, the wife of Henry II of France, who died from a wound accidentally received in a tournament. 396 James I being the first monarch of Great Britain. 397 The 88th will be a wondrous year. 398 Aristophanes, in his Comedy of the Knights, satirizes Cleon, the Athenian demagogue. He introduces a declaration of the oracle, that the eagle of Hydes, by whom Cleon was meant, his father having been a tanner, should be conquered by a serpent, which Demos thence, one of the characters in the play, expounds as meaning a maker of sausages. How Lord Bacon could for a moment doubt that this was a mere jest, it is difficult to conjecture. The following is a literal translation of a portion of the passage from the Knights, L 197 But when a leather eagle with crooked talons shall have seized with its jaws a serpent, a stupid creature, a drinker of blood, then the ten-pickle of the Paphlagonians is destroyed, but upon the sellers of sausages the deity bestows great glory, unless they choose rather to sell sausages. 399 This is a very just remark. So-called strange coincidences, and wonderful dreams that are verified, when the point is considered, are really not at all marvelous. We never hear of the 999 dreams that are not verified, but the 1000th that happens to precede its fulfillment is blasphemed by unthinking people as a marvel. It would be a much more wonderful thing if dreams were not occasionally verified. 400 Under this name he alludes to the Critias of Plato, in which an imaginary terra incognita is discoursed of under the name of the New Atlantis. It has been conjectured from this by some, that Plato really did believe in the existence of a continent on the other side of the globe. 401 Hot and fiery. 402 With the eyes closed or blindfolded. 403 He was a favorite of Tiberius, to whose murder by Nero he was said to have been an accessory. He afterwards prostituted his own wife to Caligula, by whom he was eventually put to death. 404 Liable to. 405 Chirpings like the noise of young birds. 406 Jewels or necklaces. 407 Spangles, or O's of gold or silver. Beckmann says that these were invented in the beginning of the 17th century. See Beckmann's History of Inventions, Bond Stand Lib, Volume IP 424. 408 Or antic masks. These were ridiculous interludes dividing the acts of the more serious masque. These were performed by hired actors, while the mask was played by ladies and gentlemen. The rule was, the characters were to be neither serious nor hideous. The Comus of Milton is an admirable specimen of a mask. 409 Turks. 410 He is the best asserter of the liberty of his mind, who bursts the chains that gall his breast, and at the same moment ceases to grieve. This quotation is from Ovid's Remedy of Love, 293. 411 My soul has long been a sojourner. 412 The wish is father to the thought, is a proverbial saying of similar meaning. 413 Vitae disc. Sup. Lib 3. 6 414 Jacques Clement, a Dominican friar, who assassinated Henry III of France, in 1589. The somber fanatic was but 25 years of age, and he had announced the intention of killing with his own hands the great enemy of his faith. He was instigated by the Leaguers, and particularly by the Duchess of Montpensier, the sister of the Duke of Guise. 415 He murdered Henry IV of France, in 1610. 416 Philip II of Spain having, in 1582, set a price upon the head of William of Nassau, Prince of Orange, the leader of the Protestants, Jaureguy attempted to assassinate him, and severely wounded him. 417 He assassinated William of Nassau, in 1584. It is supposed that this fanatic meditated the crime for 6 years. 418 A resolution prompted by a vow of devotion to a particular principle or creed. 419 He alludes to the Hindus, and the ceremony of sati, encouraged by the Brahmins. 420 Flinching Vitae Cic. Tuscal. Disp 2. 14 421 Every man is the architect of his own fortune. Sallust, in his letters de Republica Ordinanda, attributes these words to Appius Claudius Caecus, a Roman poet whose works are now lost. Lord Bacon, in the Latin translation of his essays, which was made under his supervision, rendered the word poet comicus, by whom he probably meant Plautus, who has this line in his Trinomus, Act 2, sc 2 nam sapiens quidem pol ipsis fingit fortunam sibi, which has the same meaning, though in somewhat different terms. 422 A serpent, unless it has devoured a serpent, does not become a dragon. 423 Or desenvoltura, implying readiness to adapt oneself to circumstances. 424 Impediments, causes for hesitation. 425 In that man there was such great strength of body and mind, that, in whatever station he had been born, he seemed as though he should make his fortune. 426 A versatile genius. 427 A little of the fool. 428 Thou carriest Caesar and his fortunes. Plud. Vit. Cales 38. 429 The fortunate. He attributed his success to the intervention of Hercules, to whom he paid a special veneration. 430 The great. Plud. Syll 34. 431 A successful Athenian general, the son of Conon, and the friend of Plato. 432 Fluency, or smoothness. 433 Lord Bacon seems to use the word in the general sense of lending money upon interest. 434 Drive from their hives the drones, a lazy race. Georgix, B4. 168 435 In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat thy bread. General 3. 19 436 In the sweat of the face of another. 437 In the Middle Ages the Jews were compelled, by legal enactment, to wear peculiar dresses and colors, one of these was orange. 438 A concession by reason of hardness of heart. He alludes to the words in St. Matthew 19. 8 439 see note to SA 19. 440 hold. 441 The imaginary country described in Sir Thomas More's political romance of that name. 442 Regulation. 443 Be paid. 444 Our author was one of the earliest writers who treated the question of the interest of money with the enlightened views of a statesman and an economist. The taking of interest was considered, in his time, immoral. Laws on this matter are extremely ancient. Moses forbids the Jews to require interest of each other. Thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury. Unto a stranger thou mayest lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury. Deuteronomy XXIII. 19, 20. Among the Greeks, the rate of interest was settled by agreement between the borrower and the lender, without any interference of the law. The customary rate varied from 10 to 33 1/3%. The Romans enacted laws against usurious interest, but their legal interest, admitted by the law of the 12 tables, was, according to some, 12 per cent, or, to others, 1/12 of the capital, i.e. 8 1/3 per cent. Justinian reduced it to 6%. In England, the legal rate of interest was, in Henry VIII's reign, 10%. It was reduced, in 1624, to 8%. It was further diminished, in 1672, to 6%. And definitively, in 1713, fixed at 5 per cent, the ordinary rate of interest throughout Europe. In France, the rates of interest have been nearly similar at the same periods. 445 He passed his youth full of errors, of madness even. Spartien. Vit. Sev 446 He was nephew of Louis XII of France, and commanded the French armies in Italy against the Spaniards. After a brilliant career, he was killed at the Battle of Ravenna, in 1512. 447 Joel 2. 28, quoted Acts 2. 17 448 He lived in the 2nd century after Christ, and is said to have lost his memory at the age of 25. 449 He remained the same, but with the advance of years was not so becoming. CIC. Brood. 95 450 The close was unequal to the beginning. This quotation is not correct. The words are, memorabilior prima pars vitae quam post rema fut, the first part of his life was more distinguished than the latter. Livy 38. Ch 53. 451 By the context, he would seem to consider great spirit and virtue as convertible terms. Edward IV, however, has no claim to be considered as a virtuous or magnanimous man, though he possessed great physical courage. 452 Features. 453 The autumn of the beautiful is beautiful. 454 By making allowances. 455 Romi 31, 2 Tim 3. 3 456 Where she errs in the one, she ventures in the other. 457 Spies. 458 Soliman the Magnificent, Sultan of the Turks. 459 Sight. 460 Knoll. 461 Have a liking for cheerful society. Momus being the god of mirth. 462 Eats up. 463 Blood. Vit. Lacul. 39 464 A vast edifice, about 20 miles from Madrid, founded by Philip II. 465 St. 5, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. 466 The cylinder formed by the small end of the steps of winding stairs. 467 The funnel of a chimney. 468 Where to go. 469 Bow, or bay, windows. 470 Flush with the wall. 471 Antechamber. 472 Withdrawing room. 473 Water courses. 474 Pine trees. 475 Kept warm in a greenhouse. 476 The damson, or plum of Damascus. 477 Currants. 478 An apple that is gathered very early. 479 A kind of quince, so called from Cotoneum, or Sidonium, the Latin name of the quince. 480 The fruit of the cornel tree. 481 The warden was a large pear, so called from its keeping well. Warden pie was formerly much esteemed in this country. 482 Perpetual spring. 483 Flowers that do not send forth their smell at any distance. 484 A species of grass of the genus Argostes. 485 The blossoms of the bean. 486 Bring or lead you. 487 Impeding. 488 Causing the water to fall in a perfect arch, without any spray escaping from the jet. 489 Lilies of the valley. 490 In rows. 491 Insidiously subtract nourishment from. 492 To consider or expect. 493 Love, are pleased with. 494 It is more advantageous to deal with men whose desires are not yet satisfied, than with those who have gained all they have wished for, and are likely to be proof against inducements. 495 In the sense of the Latin gloriosus, boastful, bragging. 496 Professions or classes. 497 Weakness, or indecision of character. 498 He probably alludes to the ancient stories of the friendship of Orestes and Pylades, Theseus and Pirithous, Damon and Pythias and others, and the maxims of the ancient philosophers. Aristotle considers that equality in circumstances and station is one requisite of friendship. Seneca and Quintus Curtius express the same opinion. It seems hardly probable that Lord Bacon reflected deeply when he penned this passage, for between equals, jealousy, the most insidious of all the enemies of friendship, has the least chance of originating. Dr. Johnson says, friendship is seldom lasting but between equals, or where the superiority on one side is reduced by some equivalent advantage on the other. Benefits which cannot be repaid, and obligations which cannot be discharged, are not commonly found to increase affection, they excite gratitude indeed, and heighten veneration, but commonly take away that easy freedom and familiarity of intercourse, without which, though there may be fidelity, and zeal, and admiration, there cannot be friendship. The Rambler, number 64. 499 In such a case, gratitude and admiration exist on the one hand, esteem and confidence on the other. 500 Lowering, or humiliating. 501 Referees. 502 Disgusted. 503 Giving no false color to the degree of success which has attended the prosecution of the suit. 504 To have little effect. 505 To this extent. 506 of the information. 507 Ask what is exorbitant, that you may obtain what is moderate. 508 This formed the first essay in the earliest edition of the work. 509 Attentively. 510 Vapid, without taste or spirit. 511 Studies become habits. 512 Splitters of common seeds, or, as we now say, splitters of straws, or hairs. Butler says of Hudibras he could distinguish and divide a hair twixt south and southwest side. 513 Causes one side to preponderate. 514 The common father. 515 As one of us. Henry III of France, favoring the league formed by the Duke of Guise and Cardinal de Lorraine against the Protestants, soon found that, through the adoption of that policy, he had forfeited the respect of his subjects. 516 See a note to Essay 15. 517 Of Castile. She was the wife of Ferdinand of Aragon, and was the patroness of Columbus. 518 The words in our version are, He that observeth the wind shall not sow, and he that regardeth the clouds shall not reap. Ecclesiastes 11. 519 Exact in the extreme. Point device was originally the name of a kind of lace of very fine pattern. 520 Appearances resembling virtues. 521 A good name is like sweet-smelling ointment. The words in our version are, A good name is better than precious ointment. Ecclesiastes 7. 522 Disregarding his own conscience. 523 To instruct under the form of praise. 524 The worst kind of enemies are those who flatter. 525 A pimple filled with pus, or purulent matter. The word is still used in the east of England. 526 The words in our version are, He that blesseth his friend with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, it shall be counted a curse to him. Proverbs XXVII. 14 527 In other words, to show what we call an esprit de corps. 528 Theologians. 529 2 Cor 11. 23 530 I will magnify my apostleship. He alludes to the words in Romans 11. 13, Inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify mine office. 531 Vaunting, or boasting. 532 Noise. We have a corresponding proverb, great cry and little wool. 533 A high or good opinion. 534 Vidi live. XXXVII 48. 535 By express command. 536 Those who write books on despising glory, set their names in the title page. He quotes from Cicero's Tusculani Disputationes, BIC 15, whose words are, Quid nostri philosophi non in his Libris Ipsis, quos scribunta contemenda gloria, sua nomina inscribunt. What do our philosophers do? Do they not, in those very books which they write on despising glory, set their names in the title page? 537 Pliny the Younger, the nephew of the elder Pliny, the naturalist. 538 One who set off everything he said and did with a certain skill. Mucianus was an intriguing general in the times of Otho and Vitellius. History 11. 539 Namely, the property of which he was speaking, and not that mentioned by Tacitus. 540 Apologies. 541 Concessions. 542 Plin. Epist 6. 17 543 Boastful. 544 All fame emanates from servants. QCIC. Deputy. Consul. V17. 545 Founders of empires. 546 He alludes to Ottoman, or Othman I, the founder of the dynasty now reigning at Constantinople. From him, the Turkish Empire received the appellation of Ottoman, or Ottoman Porte. 547 Perpetual rulers. 548 Surnamed the Peaceful, who ascended the throne of England AD 959. He was eminent as a legislator, and a rigid asserter of justice. Hume considers his reign one of the most fortunate that we meet with in the ancient English history. 549 These were a general collection of the Spanish laws, made by Alfonso X of Castile, arranged under their proper titles. The work was commenced by Don Ferdinand his father, to put an end to the contradictory decisions in the Castilian courts of justice. It was divided into 7 parts, whence its name Siete Partidas. It did not, however, become the law of Castile till nearly 80 years after. 550 Deliverers, or preservers. 551 Extenders, or defenders of the empire. 552 Fathers of their country. 553 Participators in cares. 554 Leaders in war. 555 Proportion, dimensions. 556 Equal to their duties. 557 To expound the law. 558 To make the law. 559 The Mosaic Law. He alludes to Deuteronomy XXVII. 17 Cursed be he that removeth his neighbor's landmark. 560 A righteous man falling down before the wicked is as a troubled fountain and a corrupt spring. Proverbs XXV. 26 561 Yet who turn judgment to wormwood, and leave off righteousness in the earth. Amos v7. 562 He who wrings the nose strongly brings blood. Proverbs XXX. 33 Surely, the churning of milk bringeth forth butter, and the wringing of the nose bringeth forth blood, so the forcing of wrath bringeth forth strife. 563 He will rain snares upon them. Psalm 11. 6 Upon the wicked he shall rain snares, fire, and brimstone, and an horrible tempest. 564 Strained. 565 It is the duty of a judge to consider not only the facts, but the circumstances of the case. Ovid. Trist. II 37. 566 Pliny the Younger, EPB 6, E2, has the observation, Patientiam, qui pars magna justitiae est, patience, which is a great part of justice. 567 is not successful. 568 makes him to feel less confident of the goodness of his cause. 569 Altercate, or bandy words with the judge. 570 Do men gather grapes of thorns, or figs of thistles? St. Matthew 7. 16 571 Plundering. 572 Friends of the court. 573 Parasites, or flatterers of the court. 574 Which were compiled by the Decembers. 575 The safety of the people is the supreme law. 576 Mine. 577 Yours. 578 He alludes to 1 Kings X 19, 30, the throne had 6 steps, and the top of the throne was round behind, and there were stays on either side on the place of the seat, and 2 lions stood beside the stays. And 12 lions stood there on the one side and on the other upon the 6 steps. The same verses are repeated in 1 Chronicles 9. 18, 19. 579 We know that the law is good, if a man use it lawfully. 1 Timothy 8. 580 A boast. 581 In our version it is thus rendered, Be ye angry, and sin not, let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Ephesians 4. 26 582 Senator de Irai 1. 583 In your patience possess ye your souls. Luke 16. 19 584 And leave their lives in the wound. The quotation is from Virgil's Georgics, 4. 238 585 Susceptibility upon. 586 A thicker covering for his honor. 587 Pointed and peculiarly appropriate to the party attacked. 588 Ordinary abuse. 589 The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done, is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, See, this is new? It hath been already of old time, which was before us. Ecclesiastes I 9, 10. 590 In his Phaedo. 591 There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come, with those that shall come hereafter. Ecclesiastes I 11. 592 And Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. 1 Kings 17. 1 And it came to pass after many days, that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go, show thyself unto Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. 1 Kings 18. 1 593 Confined to a limited space. 594 The whole of the continent of America then discovered is included under this name. 595 Limited. 596 Vidi Plat. Tim 3. 24 SEQ 597 Mock Disc. Sup. Live 2. 598 Sabinianus of Volaterra was elected Bishop of Rome on the death of Gregory the Great, AD 604. He was of an avaricious disposition, and thereby incurred the popular hatred. He died in 18 months after his election. 599 The Cicero speaks of as the great year of the mathematicians. On the Nature of the Gods, B4, ch. 20. By some it was supposed to occur after a period of 12,954 years, while, according to others, it was of 25,920 years duration. Plat. Tim 3. 38, SEQ 600 Concede. 601 Observed. 602 A curious fancy or odd conceit. 603 The followers of Arminius, or James Harmanson, a celebrated divine of the 16th and 17th centuries. Though called a heresy by Bacon, his opinions have been for 2 centuries, and still are, held by a large portion of the Church of England. 604 A belief in astrology, or at least the influence of the stars, was almost universal in the time of Bacon. 605 Germany. 606 Charlemagne. 607 When led thither by Alexander the Great. 608 Striking. 609 Application of the Ares, or battering ram. 610 This fragment was found among Lord Bacon's papers, and published by Dr. Raleigh in his Resuscitatio. 611 Tak. History 2. 8612 Kaz de Bell. Civ I 6. 613 Tak. Ni 5. 614 Vidi Herod. 8108, 109. 615 Varro distributes the ages of the world into three periods, viz., the unknown, the fabulous, and the historical. Of the former, we have no accounts but in scripture; for the second, we must consult the ancient poets, such as Hesiod, Homer, or those who wrote still earlier, and then again come back to Ovid, who, in his Metamorphoses, seems, in imitation perhaps of some ancient Greek poet, to have intended a complete collection, or a kind of continued and connected history of the fabulous age, especially with regard to changes, revolutions, or transformations. 616 Most of these fables are contained in Ovid's Metamorphoses and Fasti, and are fully explained in Bond's Classical Library translation. 617 Homer's Hymn to Pan. 618 Cicero, Epistle to Atticus, 5. 619 Ovid, Metamorphoses, B2. 620 This refers to the confused mixture of things, as sung by Virgil nam canebat uti magnum per inane coacta seminiterarumc animac marisque fuisant, et lacidi simul ignis, ut his exordia primus omnia, et ipsi tenor mundi concurverit orbis. Ical. 681. 621 This is always supposed to be the case in vision, the mathematical demonstrations in optics proceeding invariably upon the assumption of this phenomenon. 622 Torvaliina lupum sequitur, lupus ipsi capillum, Florentum citizen sequitur lasciva capella. Virgil, Ical. 263. 623 Ovid, Rem Amoris, v 343. Martinique Epist 624 Psalm 19. 1625 Syrinx, signifying a reed, or the ancient pen. 626 Ovid, Metam. B4. 627 Thus it is the excellence of a general, early to discover what turn the battle is likely to take, and looking prudently behind, as well as before, to pursue a victory so as not to be unprovided for a retreat. 628 It may be remembered that the Athenian peasant voted for the banishment of Aristides, because he was called the Just. Shakespeare forcibly expresses the same thought: let me have men about me that are fat, sleek-headed men, and such as sleep o' nights. Yond Cassius has a lean and hungry look, he thinks too much, such men are dangerous. If Bacon had completed his intended work upon sympathy and antipathy, the constant hatred evinced by ignorance of intellectual superiority, originating sometimes in the painful feeling of inferiority, sometimes in the fear of worldly injury, would not have escaped his notice. 629 Thus we see that Orpheus denotes learning, Eurydice, things, or the subject of learning, Bacchus, and the Thracian women, men's ungoverned passions and appetites, and c. And in the same manner all the ancient fables might be familiarly illustrated, and brought down to the capacities of children. 630 Quod procula nobis flectat fortuna gubernans, et ratio potius quam residential persuadiat ipsa. 631 Proteus properly signifies primary, oldest, or first. 632 Bacon nowhere speaks with such freedom and perspicuity as under the pretext of explaining these ancient fables, for which reason they deserve to be the more read by such as desire to understand the rest of his works. 633 As she also brought the author himself. 634 Cadite Ruffius, Justissimus Unus, qui fut ex tucri, et servantissimus equi, de Isa litervisum. Aeneid, Lib 2. 635 te autumn me brutzicut debio, amo, quod istud quicquid est nugarum me sire voluisti. 636 Regina in medias patrio vocet agminus sistro, nictum entium geminos atergo respisit anguis. Aeneid, 8. 696 637 Ovid's Metamorphoses, B3, 4, and 6, and Fasti, 3. 767 638 Declinat cursus, orumque voluble tollit. 639 The author, in all his physical works, proceeds upon this foundation, that it is possible, and practicable, for art to obtain the victory over nature, that is, for human industry and power to procure, by the means of proper knowledge, such things as are necessary to render life as happy and commodious as its mortal state will allow. For instance, that it is possible to lengthen the present period of human life, bring the winds under command, and every way extend and enlarge the dominion or empire of man over the works of nature. 640 All gift. 641 Viz, that by Pandora. 642 Felix qui potuit rerum conoscere causas, quic metus omnes et inexorabile fatum subsit pedibus, strepitumque curantis avaria. George. 2 490. 643 De augmentis scientiarum, section XXVIII. And supplem. 15 644 An allusion which, in Plato's writings, is applied to the rapid succession of generations, through which the continuity of human life is maintained from age to age, and which are perpetually transferring from hand to hand the concerns and duties of this fleeting scene. Gamma epsilon nu tau epsilon kappa tau rho phi omicron nu tau epsilon pi alpha delta alpha, kappa theta alpha pi epsilon rho lambda alpha mu pi delta alpha tau nu beta omicron nu pi alpha rho alpha delta iota delta nu tau epsilon lambda omicron iota xi lambda omega nu Plato, leg. B6. Lucretius also has the same metaphor et quasi cursors vitae lampada tradunt. 645 Ecclesiastes 12. 11 646 This is what the author so frequently inculcates in the Novum Organum, viz., that knowledge and power reciprocal,